What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mikey Yourself. And this week's video, we're going to do a little bit more work on the Cholo. Damn it! I always love it when I get packages in the mail because that means some cool stuff is about to go down. So in this week's video, we got springs, we got spacers, we got rebound springs, some washers, and the tiniest font instructions you've ever seen. So what are we looking at? We're looking at a 1-inch drop kit for the Road King. So let's talk a little bit about the kit and kind of the steps that we're going to need to do. And I've never done this before, so this is going to be a learning process for me. I've done a little bit of research on it to kind of figure out what things I need to do. And then I've also watched other people make mistakes to try to learn from those mistakes, so that way I can make this process a little bit smoother. So let's jump into this really quick. So here's our kit from LA Choppers, and this one probably applies to multiple vehicles because it also talks about kind of like Softail stuff. And one of the big call outs in this kit is whether or not you're going to do a 1-inch or a 2-inch drop. Why I say that's important is because for the touring bikes, it says not to drop them 2 inches, to stay with the 1-inch drop. And I'll tell you, I reached out to the guys at LA Chopper and they were really great about getting back to me really quickly and actually explained why you shouldn't do the 2-inch drop. Now, my first thought was the 2-inch drop might be too low and not provide enough clearance for the passing light bar, and I was wrong. Where the issue is right here. So if you're turning and that suspension is lowered, then you have a high likelihood of hitting your fender on your engine guard. I didn't even think about that. Like, that wasn't even in my head at all. Now, I'm sure it's not a guarantee, but they've done testing. They've had enough kits installed where they've run into it. So I'm not going to try to like test out what they're telling me. I'm going to believe them, right? Like, I'm going to believe that that's probably a bad idea. And understand that this is a static drop, which means that while I'm riding it and everything else going on, like, it's not going to go up. It's always going to be lowered that 1 inch. So unlike an air suspension where you can bring it up and get that clearance back, we're not going to have that. So it's going to look low all the time. And with that, it's a sacrifice. So I'm going to get that 1-inch drop, which isn't too bad. So I think 1 inch is about 2 fingers. So we'll measure this out so we can see what the current clearance is, and then take another measurement once we get this kit installed. So let's talk about the kit a little bit more. So in the kit, like I said, you get your mainspring, you get the rebound spring. So this is not a compensator spring, this is a rebound spring. This spring goes on your damper. So in the bottom of the shock, you got a damper. That's what gets bolted in from the bottom underneath. And there was a spring on it. So we're going to replace that spring. If you're doing a 2-inch drop, I believe you add this spring to the existing spring that's there. We're going to replace it, right? That keeps us within that 1 inch. And then you have your spacers that you cut down based on how much preload you're kind of aiming for. Now, when I saw this in the pictures, I was like, oh, that looks like PVC. It is straight up PVC pipe. So if for whatever reason you mess up your cuts, don't worry. You can go to Home Depot, you can go to Lowe's, Ace Hardware, anybody who sells PVC, and pick this up. So no sweat, right? I probably got a couple of feet of this just laying around in the garage anyways. So let's talk a little bit about the steps of the process. Okay, so like I said, these instructions are really small and they kind of walk you through things pretty good, but just to kind of, I guess, oversimplify it, I don't know. So we're going to need to take off the headlight. The nacelle, that's got to come off. The passing lights will have to come off again because we've got to access the bolts or the caps that are up on top of here, right? So we're gonna also have to take off the fender. The wheels got to come off. Once we do that, based on some of the, like I said, the mistakes or kind of the tips that I saw from other videos, we're gonna break some things loose prior to removing the forks from the bike. So those two things are going to be the damper bolt. So that's the bolt that's going up from underneath. So you can't see it right now, but it goes up from the bottom. And then the other thing we're going to want to break loose is the actual cap to the fork, because I don't have a vise that can hold it. And even if I did have a vise, I don't have the special clamp, so that way you don't damage your fork while you're holding it. So the trick to that is to break it loose while it's still here in this. So we'll have to drop it down a little bit, but then we reclamp it so that way it acts as our vise. Break that thing loose, and then we can pull it out. And at that point, we'll remove that cap, and of course we'll, you know, expect that pop, right? So once we do that, we'll release the pinch bolts, remove those forks, then we'll get that, like I said, we'll take that top off, get the pop, pull the spring out. We got to drain all the fluid that's in there. And if this has never been serviced, this is the 2007 oil that's in there, that fork oil, it's probably going to stink, but we'll find out. It's old, but not too old, not like Grandpappy Road King old, right? So we'll see what's up. I'm hoping it doesn't stink. Regardless, I've got a tank to put it in, and we'll get it over to O'Reilly's or somebody, and they can deal with the stink. But once that's done, then we're going to collapse them, because you want to add some pressure to that damper, because there's like a little cap that sits on the bottom. We need to add pressure so that stays in place while we pull the damper out, and then replace that spring real quick, and then we throw that sucker back in, re-bolt it up, and once that's done, it's really reassembly. It's all things in reverse. We drop in the springs from LA Choppers, and then we got to figure out like how to determine what our preload is. So they've got some instructions on the preload, and they call out, I think, like an inch and a quarter for most folks. And then if you're as they call out, an aggressive rider or a heavier guy like myself, then you might want to do like an 1 3/4. So before we get started, because this is the part I always forget to do, is kind of the before. After is always thing that you focused in on, because you're like, oh, that looks good. You start taking pictures and you're like, man, what was that like before? So let's measure this out really quick. And right now, and we are on a jack, so the wheel's not on the ground, but the amount of weight of the bike on itself isn't going to really make a big of a difference. So we're currently from the top of the fender to the bottom of the passing light bar about 4 3/4 inches. So after this, we should be down to about 3 3/4 is what my expectation is. Let's see how close we get to that. Okay, so now I'm at a point where I'm ready to drain the forks. So I figure we'll take the opportunity, pull that drain plug out, let it come on out. Just one less thing I got to worry about, or at least, you know, limit the amount of fluid that's in there for now. So I threw down it's actually a doggy pee pad. These are really great if you're worried about making a mess. So I've got that down, got my catch pan, and we're gonna go ahead and let it drain. So while that's gonna be draining though, what we will do is attack that bolt that I was talking about. And see, I don't know if I can get you there. You can see the access point there, and then on the bottom of this one, it's gonna be right up in there. We'll break those loose. So we don't want to take them out yet. We want to break them loose. And the reason we're breaking them loose now is because right now it's got tension on it. So the spring is pushing down on that damper, which won't allow it to move so freely. Because if you try to take it off with that tension off, then of course there's no pressure, so it'll spin. So I want to show you the oil that came out of those forks. That is some pretty dark stuff there. it's almost like, I mean, it's dark. It's like literally, I mean, that's all right. So here's the table of parts. I've only marked one side, and you may be asking, like, well, why did you take off the cans? You don't necessarily have to take off the cans, and you're absolutely right. The reason I took them off is because I'm going to actually polish the lower to give it almost that chrome look. I figured I might as well take advantage of that while I'm had it off, and at the same time put a good cleaning on this chrome as well, just to really make them look nice, right? That's all about. So at this point, what we're going to want to do is remove these caps, and this is the part where it's going to pop, and it's important, you know, that you put your hand over it. Treat it like a champagne bottle, right? Like, you know that cork's going to come out. Don't go firing it off, because this is metal and it will dent, break, or damage something. So you just want to put your hand with a towel or something over it, and then slowly undo it until you get that pop. Once it pops, then you've released that pressure and you can pull the spring out. Okay, so it's Jack in the Box time, right? So we'll start cranking on this thing, and it's definitely easier to do with two people, from what I saw, but it's definitely doable with one. So we're gonna go ahead and loosen this thing until we get that pop, and hopefully it's not a strong pop. All right, it's not too bad. I was anticipating a little bit more, so that kind of worked out. So at this point, we can go ahead and pull out the stock spring. And if you notice, the tighter windings are on the bottom. Now in the instructions for LA choppers, they say to put them on top. I've read that like Progressive, they put theirs on the bottom, something about sound or whatever, but I'm gonna keep with LA Chopper's instruction. They've done me well so far, so that's good. So now at this point, we can go ahead and try to drain any of the remaining fluid, which means we may have to like kind of, you know, push down on it. Ultimately at the end of this, we'll push down on it, so that way we put that pressure on the damper. I don't know, but I should look up what the name of it is, but you know, it's down there. So we'll do these one at a time. I'll let you watch me do one. I'll knock out the other one, and then it's a reinstall video at that point. So it's super simple to compress this down. You want to be careful, don't push down hard, because there are some valves in there, so there's probably still fluid, and if you push down, it might come shooting out at you. So don't get all crazy. All right, so you want to just kind of slowly bring it down. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and dump this out, and we'll pull out that damper. All right, so let's take a look at the size difference between the stock and the LA Chopper. So you can see there's a significant drop there, right? So that's a big. Okay, so we got that bolt out. Now we're going to go ahead and pull out the damper and replace the spring that's on there with this one. I'm going to grab my catch here, because I think there's going to still be some fluid in there, even though we've kind of done everything. So they say to kind of shake it out. Oh, there it is. All right. So here's our damper. We're going to remove that stock spring. We're going to put the new spring on. And we're going to give it a little bit of a wipe down to get some of that old oil off of there too. It's not going to be perfect. All right, so now we can drop this back in and put that bolt back in place. All right, so what I didn't think about is when I measured, I just assumed like this is going to be pushing down, so I made this 3/4 of an inch or 1 3/4 longer for the compression. What I didn't take into account is how long this is. So I was doing 1 3/4 plus this, which is about 1 inch. So I'm going to cut 1 inch off of this spacer, and then it will actually truly be 1 3/4. All right, let's try this again. All right, guys, so unfortunately I'm not gonna be able to do this by myself. I'm gonna need some help, so I'll bring it back once I have that help. Okay, I was able to do it by myself after all. So the way I did this was I flipped the shock upside down and really just put as much weight as I can down with one arm, and then push down on the with my left arm, and then start twisting that barrel until I got tightened down. So that worked. Wasn't easy, but it worked. So yeah, this one's ready to go back on the bike. I'm gonna knock out this other shock and then we can install them. All right, so I just finished filling up the fluid on the last fork here. If you guys are wondering, where do you get a funnel this small? Harbor Freight, baby. All right, all right, we're off the jack. So measuring this out, I want to say it was like 4 3/4 or something like that before, and now we're looking at about, forgive me, it's a little harder to do with holding the camera too, but we're looking at about 3 and about 3 3/4, maybe even a little bit less. So I'll have to rewind the tape, but I think that is exactly 1 inch drop. So it looks pretty good. I think we're gonna have to look at it outside. Now, right now I have the rear end inflated, so let's go ahead and dump it. And what we want to do is check our kickstand angle, because if you lower your bike too much, one of the things you got to consider is that kickstand was set up to be to let your bike lean with your bike at a certain height, and if you go lower, sometimes you need to get a different kickstand so that way you can compensate for that angle, or else it'll be very easy for your bike to tip over while on its jiffy stand or the kickstand. So let me go ahead and let's dump that rear end and see what it looks like. Right. With my wheel turned to the right, it's right there, man. It would be very easy for this bike to be tipped over if I had my wheel to the right, which if you park like most people, you never turn your wheel to the right, you turn your wheel to the left. because that's the locking position. So in the locking position, it is very sturdy. It's not going over. So that looks great. And then even in a straight stance, so if you're wanting to park it in a straight stance, again, very strong. It ain't going over. So I think I'm good with the stand that I have right now. So yeah, let's take a look at it outside so we can truly appreciate how this lowering kit has made this bike look. So there she is. Looking good, boo, looking good. So you can definitely see the difference in the forks. I've got the rear suspension dropped down all the way, and definitely sitting low. All right, let's talk about some lessons learned. Okay guys, so I'm going to try something a little new at the end of this video here, and that is to provide you lessons learned. So something that I haven't done in the previous videos is kind of go over, like, you know, formally a list of the gotchas or tips, tricks, that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping that I can kind of summarize it to make the job a little easier for you. And again, you can learn from my mistakes or learn from the things that I figured out, right? Like a trick or something like that. So I did do a little bit of research on this. I've never done this before on a Harley, so it was all new to me. And so here are the things that I'd say you want to do, or my lessons learned is, first and foremost, know what you want, right? What you're going to buy. So when I first bought this kit, I was kind of bouncing back and forth on whether or not I was going to lower the bike 1 inch versus 2 inches. And of course, as I mentioned, I found out that 2 inch wasn't an option. So that's something you want to know. Does the kit that you're buying, is it going to give you what you're looking for? So make sure you do your homework. Make sure you understand what it is you're getting. If you're not worried about your bike being lowered all the time, then maybe the air ride is more for you, or you know, static drop and stuff like that. So those are the things that you want to make sure you do your homework before you make that purchase, because there's nothing more frustrating than having kind of post-purchase, you know, regret, right? So don't be afraid to reach out to the sellers. And I say don't be afraid. Don't hesitate, right? So I think a lot of times we kind of want to figure it out ourselves as do-it-yourselfers and whatnot. Reach out, ask the questions. Like, you know, I saw that it said it wouldn't be able to go to a 2 inch drop, so I reached out to the guys at LA Choppers and I said, why not, right? Like, I assumed it was the fender problem with the passing bar, and found out it was totally something different, something I hadn't even thought about, right? So leverage their knowledge. It's their product. They've done a ton of testing on this stuff for the most part. So they'll be able to give you that feedback, right? And maybe that's the thing that is a decision breaker for you. So if I was dead set on a 2 inch drop, then I wouldn't have bought, right? I was okay with the 1 inch drop, so not a big deal for me. The other things that I want to point out is just kind of using, so again, kind of, I guess, the tips, hacks, whatever you want to call them, but using the fork clamps, right? So because I didn't have a big vise, or I don't have a big vise, or the vise clampy things, using the forks to hold, or using the clamp for the forks to hold that in place so I can break loose the bolts before removing things. So that just made my life a ton easier when I started doing the disassembly, right? So that was that damper bolt in the bottom, literally just breaking it loose, and that bolt on top, the cap for the springs, right? So with that, 2 people on this job would have been better than 1. It was very tough compressing that spring and trying to twist that cap on, especially because oil gets all over the place, even the slightest film of it. So it's really hard to kind of get a good grip on stuff and be able to twist it. So had I had somebody else with me, it would have made the job a ton easier. So that's something that, you know, was a learning experience. And if you have somebody there, great. If you don't, you might want to do a couple arm curls and stuff like that before jumping onto the job, because it was tough. Hold on filling your forks later in the process. So you saw I did it at the end there. That way you can get them up into the triple tree and all that kind of stuff, and just leverage using one of those things. Because until you get that top cap put on, there's a possibility if you drop it or if it falls over or you lay it on its side that stuff's gonna leak out. So don't frustrate yourself by getting a mess made or anything like that. Do it kind of towards the end, and that way it's just cleaner for you. And granted, it is a pain if you leave your handlebars on like I did. I understand some people actually take their handlebars off to do this job. You know, whatever floats your boat, right? I mean, so it's all good. Whatever makes you feel like it's easier for you. And the last thing, and this is something I've pointed out in many videos, is to take the opportunity to clean those areas that you normally don't get to, right? And some of it is because it helps it look better, and then other parts are really just because it's good maintenance, right? You don't want a whole bunch of dirt kind of, you know, building up and holding in moisture and stuff like that, because that builds and creates corrosion, which breaks down metal, and that's something you definitely don't want to do, especially in your steering on your bike. So granted, it might take 50 years to really make an impact, but then take about a couple seconds to wipe that stuff down. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you enjoy my content, become a subscriber. Again, this is a community thing. I really like folks to share the knowledge that they have in the comments, because I don't know it all. So if I can take the opportunity to provide you with information, I'm hoping you'll be willing to take the opportunity to share information with me. Or if somebody has a question, maybe I'm not able to answer it, post a question in the comments and feel free to respond to those people, because they're looking for help just like I am. So I hope, again, we kind of just work together as folks that are into the same thing. So until my next video does post, I hope to see you in the wind.